Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. How was your week? I know I took yesterday off. I got a bit sick, but we're back today, and I'm back with more scary stories. Today, we're doing 3 more police stories. So, if you were a cop, or if you know anyone who was a cop, and has had any encounters, ask them to email me, or email me yourself, which will also be in the description. So, with that said, whether you're sitting around the campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. A dying man can do nothing easy. Frank Sinatra. I worked as a police officer in Boston. My father was part of the Boston PD task force that worked against the Winter Hill Gang in the 70s. There's a photo of my grandfather escorting the Boston Strangler out of the courthouse in 1960. So, Boston law enforcement is in my blood. Most think Boston is a normal city, that it's just like any other. Only with more Dunkin' Donuts and Tom Brady jerseys. But, in 11 years of working for the BPD, I've seen too much to think Boston is normal. I've lived in Boston for all 38 years of my life. I've been working in Boston for 20 years. As an officer the last 11. I moved out when I was 18 for college and told myself I'd never live with my parents again. But, after my mom passed away and my dad got sick, me and my fiancée, Vanessa, moved in with my dad to help take care of him. So, I was back living in South Boston again. Yet again, I was a Southie. I had to switch departments, which was sad, as I'd been working at a A7 for the first 2 years on the job, where nothing of note really happened, but I admit it was nice to be back in South Boston. My first unexplainable encounter was that I got a call over the Back Bay, which is odd. If you don't know, Boston's neighborhoods are pretty divided. For example, I wouldn't go walking around Roxbury at night without a good reason. Meanwhile, Brookline is like the Ritz. Back Bay is pretty ritzy too. Another odd thing about that call is that one of the residents heard something rooting through their trash. At first, they thought it was a raccoon, but the damn thing roared and they thought it might be a black bear. We get the occasional bear up in Charlestown, but Back Bay is pretty densely populated, so it's really uncommon. The alley monster. It was about 10 o'clock, and I headed out to the call with my partner for the night, James Anton. That's a thing movies get wrong about police work. We don't have a set partner. We work with someone assigned the same shift as us that night. I still think Anton was dirty. He just had the look. Heavy-set, greased-back hair, voice that sounded like he smoked 2 packs every day since '87. Had been with the same force for 24 years. He was the perfect package of corruption. We arrived on the corner of Beacon Street and Dean Road, where there was a suspected black bear rooting around in someone's trash. We both stepped out of the squad car, Officer Anton taking far longer than I. We looked around. There really wasn't much else we could do. We're not going to go bear hunting in the woods for this thing, so we checked the alley between the buildings. I turned the corner only to find 3 tipped over trash cans. One with 4 claw marks cutting deep into it all the way down to the tall plastic trash bin. Officer Sherlock Anton then says, "I don't think a raccoon did this." I sort of chuckled at how profoundly obvious of a statement that way. I responded with, "I'd say that's a safe bet." We both heard what came next, a deep and guttural growl from the end of the alley. It was about 15 feet away from us. I shined my flashlight down and the beam of light refracted off the beast's red eyes in the night. It was about 4 feet long, had sharp long teeth. It wasn't much larger than a dog, but it was far more intimidating. Its hot breath created steam from the cold March night. It was hairless and had blood on its lips and dripping down its snout. Its hairless skin was loose and almost looked infected. It was a true horror, and it's safe to say I was pretty stunned. It began to move towards me, and I reached to my hip and drew my service pistol. I shot towards the alley monster, but didn't connect. The thing got close enough to lunge at me. It pounced as I fired 2 more shots at it, and it dug its claw into my ballistic vest. The claws seemed to be 10 inches long and were razor sharp. It tore the cloth, but just scratched against the Kevlar. Officer Anton was terrified, and while he had drawn a service pistol, he didn't do much of shit. The creature's attack knocked me back on my feet. I hit the dirt and pavement of the alley's unforgiving ground. The monster snarled at both me and Officer Pudge one more time before taking off into the night. After a search of the area, we called animal control and told them there was a rabid animal on the loose. We also discovered multiple dead house cats in the alley that the thing had been feasting on. Officer Anton and I both filed reports, and after my shift ended, I just went home still trying to process the whole thing. The BPD's official stance: a rabid dog that had mange. I tried to argue with the captain who finalized and signed the report that there's no way whatever attacked me was a dog, but he dismissed me every time. I stopped arguing after a week. There was really no point. Still, I hope some redneck shot it. The Phantom Strangler. I don't believe in ghosts. I really don't. I think that the people that claim to have seen ghosts wanted to see them, and so they did. That being said, the second unexplained thing in my career happened over a year after the alley monster incident. It was during a day shift. It was about 8 a.m. I was partnered with an officer named Wendell Smo. Officer Smo was a good man. Probably one of my best friends on the force. We got called to South End, where a man said he woke up to a man attempting to strangle him. We assumed it was a breaking and entering call, and took off, arriving at a large apartment building on Commonwealth Avenue. The caller told dispatch he was in apartment 13 on the second floor. Wendell and I ran up to the building, sprinting in and up the stairs, yelling, "Boston Police!" the whole time. We made it up the stairs and found apartment 13, and Wendell yelled, "Boston Police!" and pounded on the door with his fist. When we heard nothing, I told Smo to step back, and I kicked just below the deadbolt, breaking in the door. We swept the house and eventually made it to the bedroom, where a man was cowering behind his bed. He was middle-aged, about 46. He was balding and was wearing a bathrobe. Wendell kept his weapon up and asked, "Are you the homeowner?" The man nodded. "Is this intruder still in your home?" The man nodded and pointed across the hall to the room with a closed door. I nodded at Wendell and said, "I'll check. Make sure he's okay and meet me in there." Sliding across the wall, keeping my service pistol pointed at the door, I slowly turned the handle of the old home's door. I swung it open, and quickly. Standing inside was a man in a gray suit, facing the window away from me. I pointed my service pistol at him and yelled, "Boston Police! On the ground now!" He didn't move. I began to reach for my handcuffs with my other hand. I slowly approached the suspect, who turned around to face me. I stumbled backwards. I was staring at Albert DeSalvo, a man who died in 1973 and was also the Boston Strangler. He had a strange smile on his face, and as I regained my bearings, he disappeared. Like smoke whispering into the air, he was just gone. Wendell, hearing my yelling from just a few moments earlier, joined me in this room. He asked what had happened, and I tried to explain to him what had happened, but he just looked at me like I was crazy. I wasn't really sure who to call, but the fire department ran some tests and found there was a dangerous level of carbon monoxide in the building, which was then evacuated. That's what everyone attributed to me seeing Albert DeSalvo. I suppose this is what I attribute it to as well. It just felt so real, though. I'm not sure what to believe, really. The BPD's official stance: visual hallucination caused by carbon monoxide. The oddity that is Officer Jackson Ba. This isn't really an odd experience, just something I've noticed about one of the guys I work with. Jackson Ba is 27 years old. He's been working in the South End department for about a year when I started noticing odd behaviors about him. Firstly, he is insanely intelligent. He has a degree from Harvard and studied at MIT for a year, and yet he's working the night shift in the department that gets the most work. It's far beneath him to be working here, and I don't really get it. Another odd thing: every one of his cases has a 100% solve rate. Now, sure, 1 million people work on any given case, but a 100% solve rate is unheard of, and yet, I think I'm the only one to notice. A few weeks after I saw the Boston Strangler, We had a family mixer for National Police Week. None of Officer Ba's family was there. When I asked him about it, he said they were busy and dropped the subject. I was convinced there was something odd going on here. I invited him over to my home to have dinner with me and Vanessa, and he declined. On the night of April 4th, I was on a shift with Ba. 2 local kids had shoplifted liquor from one of the gas stations in South End. It's the same shit kids in my class used to do in high school. Ba and I were getting ready to call their parents when they took off. I was able to grab one and put him in the back of the squad car. I then followed Ba, who was chasing after the other kid, who was about 25 feet in front of him. I was about 10 feet behind the both of them. They turned a corner, and by the time I got there, Officer Ba had already had the kid by the arm and pressed against the wall. I'm telling you right now, there's no way he closed the gap in that amount of time. Usain Bolt couldn't have closed that gap that quickly. We took him back to the squad car and called both of their parents after they begrudgingly gave us their phone numbers. The kids' parents came to collect them, and that was pretty much the end of our night. But all I could think about was how quickly Jackson had moved. I mentioned it to Vanessa when I woke up the next morning. She said that I was just being crazy, and that maybe the kid had tripped or something. I told her I agreed, but at the same time, I didn't. There was no scuff marks on the kid's pants or shirt, and he didn't trip. He was running at full speed with a large gap between him and Jackson, and Ba somehow caught up. I planned to ask him about it when we had a shift together again, but I never got that chance. 2 weeks and 2 days later on April 13th, inexplicably, Jackson Ba resigned from the Boston Police Department. His desk was empty, and in 5 minutes, he was gone. I mentioned the weird stuff to the same captain I talked to about the alley monster with. He said, and I quote, "Yeah, he was weird. So what? Being weird isn't a crime. Get out of my office." So, that was the end of that. I had more pressing work to do, so I suppose I forgot about Officer Ba. We used to talk about weird stuff he did sometimes in the break room. I tried to find him on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc., but it seems like he's not on any social media. Jackson was weird, but he was a fantastic police officer, and I hope he's okay. The BPD's official statement, non-applicable. The April UFO sighting. This is a quick story, but just a few hours after Jackson quit at about 4 a.m., we got about a dozen or so calls about a UFO sighting over Copley Square. I didn't drive out there myself, but 2 officers, Cassandra Tuttleman and George Anover, did. They said they saw something, but couldn't be sure of what. The next morning, the Hanscom Air Force Base announced that they had been doing weather balloon testing, and a few had drifted into the city. That was enough for me and most of the people in the office. Still, we got a bunch of letters from a tinfoil hat-wearing lady named Allison Wesley. She's our local conspiracy theorist, and we get about 10 letters a year from her. She called it a cover-up, but I doubted it. Probably was just some weather balloons. The BPD's official statement: a weather balloon drifted into the city, which was mistaken as an unidentified flying object. The bar that doesn't exist. Every so often, we hear about a bar that doesn't exist. It's always the same story. A young out-of-town man, it has never been a woman, comes into the station and says that the night before he went out for a drink and walked into a bar either called the Lucky Tap or Bakey's. He stays for 1 or 2 drinks and then leaves. When he gets back to his hotel, he discovers that he's missing his wallet or his credit card or some other personal effect. He figures he'll go get it in the morning. He goes back in the morning, only to find that the building is abandoned, and that the forgotten item is sitting on the step of the building. This has been a case that has been puzzling the BPD since before I even worked there. We usually get about 2 a year, sometimes more. As far as I can tell, the first case happened in September of 1993, and has been happening ever since. The strangest case I was ever a part of. Me and Officer Anton were on a shift together. Remember the greasy slime ball? It was a pretty slow night, and so we were just driving around South End waiting for anything to come in. I think we drove down every street in South End that night. So, when a man came in the next morning and gave us the same story, but said that the bar was in South End, that confused both me and Anton. Every night shift officer was told to look out for the names of the bar that doesn't exist, and so we had been. We didn't see anything. Nothing. He described a neon sign that had a cloverleaf and a tap on it. We didn't see any of that. It's not like we can launch a full investigation either, because no crime is being committed that we know of. Sure, maybe trespassing, but there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence there was ever even a bar called the Lucky Tap or Bakey's. The working theory currently is that people are breaking into abandoned buildings and building a bar, then tearing it down in one night. Personally, I think that's ridiculous. There's a vital detail we're missing, and that's the motive. They don't steal anything from these men. Everything is always returned right on the step. We've tried staking out different abandoned buildings, but it never works. Currently, it's still on the list of strange and unsolved cases. The BPD's official statement, unsolved. A room full of dead mobsters. I have no doubt that this is the most disturbing thing that happened to me when I was working in Southend. It was also the final case I ever worked on in Southend. We were getting many noise complaints from the Fort Point district. Fort Point is mostly warehouses, but it was a dying district. The warehouses had pretty much all dried up, so it was just all abandoned warehouses. There were a few that were still up and running, but a few of them had been turned into apartment complexes. It was about 5 a.m. when I was just wrapping up my shift when the call came in. It was a woman who lived in one of the apartment buildings. She said that some asshole was playing trumpet music in the abandoned warehouse next door. I was once again with Officer Anton James, and we drove to the abandoned building. I figured she had meant that someone was playing trumpet music like on a radio, but no. As I stepped out of my car, I could hear it. Some asshole playing trumpet in an empty building. I told Officer Anton to go around the back door, and the larger man sighed and began to lumber around the building. I entered through the front door, which was pretty difficult to open. This place had been abandoned since the 60s, and as a result, the door was rusted almost entirely shut, and I had to really push on it to get it open. Once I finally entered, I shined my flashlight around the building, but didn't see anything. There were no walls. It was just a massive football field-sized building with nothing but heaps of trash. I saw no one. I continued to follow the sound of the trumpet to the back right corner. I called out, "Hey Anton, you in here?" I heard him trying to force in one of the doors, but it wouldn't budge. "No, I can't get in." I should have figured. "Alright, fine. Just go around and enter from the door I got open." I heard him sigh loudly and start to make his way back around the building. I could now hear that the trumpet music was coming from below me. I shined my flashlight to the floor. There were handles attached to a large metal grate. It kind of looked like the exterior doors to a basement. I pulled on the metal handle and the door didn't budge. I had to really pull before it started to move at all. I wasn't able to get it open on my own, so once Officer Anton made it around, he and I both pulled on the doors to get them to swing open. What sat in front of us was a long staircase which descended into the darkness of the earth. I could still hear the trumpet playing at the bottom of the steps, so I began to descend. James grabbing my wrist. "What the hell are you doing?" I pulled my wrist out of his grasp. "Investigating." I continued down the steps with my flashlight. As I was about halfway down, he said, "Well, I'm not coming." I continued on replying, "Great, it'll make my job easier." I reached the bottom of the steps, and in front of me was a wooden door. I grabbed the handle and pushed it open. I couldn't hear the music anymore as I stepped in. There was a light switch on the wall next to me as I entered. I flipped it on. These old 1960s lamps flipped on, and sitting around a poker table were 8 fully decomposed bodies. Bullet holes riddled in the walls and table. Bones were all around the floor and on the table. These 8 idiots had killed each other. I fell backward out of the door and back to the steps, looking horrified at the 8 dead men in the room. What I didn't know then, but I do now, is that I had just solved the longest running cold case in the history of the BPD. They were all later determined to be missing members of the Bianacci crime family, including the brother of leader Lou Bianacci, Vin Bianacci. They had been there for more than 40 years. Something went wrong with that poker game and they all shot each other. We'll never really know what went down in the basement. The one thing I have seen ignored in every statement, in every report, nothing mentions the trumpet. There was a trumpet in the room, And you want to know what the BPD's official statement was? The wind blowing through the trumpet caused the noise. That is bullshit. Not only is it impossible, it's impossible that anyone could really think that. That's what I told Captain Shit-for-Brains, who told me to drop it. I wasn't gonna fucking drop it. When he heard I was talking about it again, he told me if I cared that much to take it up with the commissioner. He was joking, but that is exactly what I did. William Daphne, the commissioner of police in Boston at the time, worked in the BPD headquarters in the center of the city. I walked right into his office, told him the situation, and requested a transfer. He granted that request. My father passed soon after. Pancreatic cancer, unfortunately. If I could start again, I wouldn't have done my time in South Boston any differently. This post, I only talked about the strange or bad things that happened while I was working there at the D6. It doesn't mention any of the great things that happened to me while working there. I invited most of my coworkers there, to mine and Vanessa's wedding in the summer. In August of that year, I started working at the D4 by Fenway. Nothing strange happened while I was an officer there. However, in November, I got promoted to detective. No more late nights running traffic stops. This would be the beginning of the truly horrifying. I probably shouldn't be telling anyone this. My department has done everything to cover up this incident, but I need to tell someone. I need to reaffirm that I'm not crazy and this actually happened. My name is Jackson, and I'm a police officer in the lovely state of South Carolina. Now, as I try and not to get into too much trouble with my department, I am not going to disclose the location of where I work and where this incident occurred, but I'm probably screwed anyway by telling any of you this. Before I begin, I should preface that the campground had some ties with the police, and when they had an issue, we were normally called. Now, to the story. The incident happened a little after I joined the force. We were called out to an older campground. This one had been a family-owned campground for at least 3 generations before being shut down. If I remember correctly, they were just starting to put in some RV sites. Anyway, back to the story. This is just hard to write. Me and my partner were called in for a minor disturbance, and we weren't expecting much, as even though, most of the time, they are fine, this campground has been the site of more than a few marital abuse cases. When we got there, we went to the reported site. We were expecting the wife to be there, but instead, we found the husband in tears. As we approached, he started telling us that he and his wife had gotten into an argument about something trivial. I can't remember exactly what, but as it got more heated, the wife ended up slapping the husband and running off with her kids into the woods, and they were never found, unfortunately. A few weeks later, we got a call from the ranger that a few campers had been missing for a few days and needed some help tracking them down. According to the ranger, the group was pretty large, and they were normally careful about things, but hadn't contacted the ranger when they said they would be back from backcountry hiking. Me, my partner, and a few other officers were helping to search until about 2 in the afternoon. That's probably about when we found the campsite. The tents were all torn up, food and beer had been scattered around the fire, but there wasn't any sign of the group of 5 campers. One of the other officers were looking a little outside the campsite when he found part of a body. It was about half an arm. It looked as if it were torn off at the elbow, and there was a trail of dried blood from what the arm was attached to. We ended up calling in backup for this. Not more than 4 hours later, we found what appeared to be an old abandoned one-room schoolhouse. The windows were boarded up and the roof caved in on one side. We stepped up on the rotted porch to open the double-door entrance and jumped back and screamed after the door swung open. There was one of the campers in the fetal position missing a chunk of his head, multiple bits of skin, and his feet were gone. I managed to fight off the wave of nausea that my partner ended up succumbing to. After staring for a few minutes, we managed to walk in through the other door, past the body. At the base of the chalkboard in the back was another camper that was flayed and died before it was fully removed. We heard muffled movement from under a small hatch where we found 2 of the campers thankfully alive. Suddenly, a door opened and out ran a woman with a large knife, stabbing my partner in the shoulder and then ran at me. One of the other officers had come in as she screamed and managed to shoot her before she got to me. As she fell, She screamed, "No! That bastard promised me I would see my daughter! Don't go in there! He hasn't healed my daughter yet!" Luckily, we managed to restrain her. The other officer handcuffed her while I went to the other room. This time, I did throw up. Sitting there on what I would assume is the teacher's desk was a kid. She was really torn up and had multiple wounds. Lying next to her was another one of the campers who was also missing some pieces. The pieces of the other campers were next to the child, and some of them had already been somehow combined with her. I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, and turned around and shot at a shadowy figure. All it did was stand up, lean next to my ear and whisper, "Why does everyone hate my work?" He then walked out of the room, and I blacked out. When I came to, I was in the hospital next to my partner. I had apparently been unconscious for 2 days before I woke up. We both recovered, but my partner lost most of the use in his right arm. The woman died of unknown causes and on the way to be interrogated. Apparently, she was the wife who ran off, and at some point in between, the kid died as well. I don't know what that figure was, but I don't want to feel the dread that I felt when it leaned forward ever again. But sometimes, when the shadows are there in the darkness, I sometimes hear a soft, nearly silent whisper, "Just wait, your time will come." The following is a transcript of a 911 call made at 9:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at June 15th, 2015, from a rural home. The call lasted approximately 6 minutes, from 9:17 to 9:23 p.m. The conversation is presented here in full, unabridged, although out of respect for the victims and their family, their identities and the location have been redacted. Dispatcher answers call. 911, what is your emergency? Low, labored breathing can be heard on the line. Dispatcher, 911, what is your emergency? The sound of breathing persists. Hello? A young woman's voice answers, speaking in a whisper, audibly distraught. There are things in my house. They took my parents. Alright, ma'am. Can you give me the address so I can notify a squad car and send them to your location? Alright, ma'am. The police are on their way and should arrive in a few minutes. Just remain on the line with me and try to stay calm, alright? Okay. What's your name? My name's Allie. Alright, Allie. Are you in a safe place right now? Yeah, I'm locked in my room. I'm hiding in the closet. Alright, Allie. Can you tell me exactly how many people live there with you? It's just me and my parents, but they're gone. They took them. Who took them? Who's in the house with you right now? They're... She trails off, breaking down sobbing. Allie, please, try to calm down and tell me what the intruders look like. They're not human. Did wild animals attack your parents? No, they're dead. Excuse me? They're dead. Things. Corpses. They're rotting. They came out of the TV and took my parents into the TV with them. Silent for several seconds. Okay. It's all his fault. Who? The salesman. Audibly confused at this point. What salesman? The one who came to our house today and sold us that fucking box. What box, Allie? He told us to hook it up to our TV and it would... To herself. Oh shit. What did he say? He said something about how it would, improve the viewing experience and, add a new dimension of heightened realism to what we watched. He said it was a new revolution in home entertainment and would place the viewer in the TV. We thought it was some 3D thing. My parents weren't interested, but he offered us a free 1-week trial before we decided to buy it or not. I see. We set it up and started to watch a movie night, but... Breaks down crying. Allie, please try to remain calm. Something went wrong. These things came out of the TV and grabbed my parents. They dragged them into the TV. I tried to run outside, but the door wouldn't open. I ran up to my room. I think some of them are still in the house with me. Allie, are you taking any kind of medication or, recreational substances? Raises her voice. I'm not crazy, goddammit. It's really happening. Allie, just try to remain calm. The police should be there any time now. I need you to try to... At this point, A sound can be heard in the background, pounding and moans. Distinctly panicked. Oh God! They're outside my room and they're trying to get in! Is there any way you can get outside? No, none of the doors or windows will open. I'm trapped in here! Sounds of pounding and moaning grow louder. Oh God, they're breaking the door down! Ellie, please try to be quiet and remain hidden. The police will arrive any second. Hysterical and not listening. Oh God, don't let them get me too! Hurry! Sound of splintering wood and a crash, moans and groans. The young woman was terrified. Oh God, they're in my room! The sound of a door being opened, followed by hysterical screaming and sounds of a struggle. Young woman. No! Get away from me! Don't touch me! No! Amy. The call ends at this point. The police arrived less than a minute later. They found the residence, which belonged to a couple and their 16-year-old daughter, empty and no bodies. There were signs of a violent struggle, and upstairs, the door to the daughter's room had been broken down. Her closet was empty, but her phone was found lying on the floor. No trace of the missing three have ever been found, and they are presumed dead. Police found no evidence of the device the girl claimed her parents had installed into their television set. In his official report, one of the investigating officers noted that when they arrived, the film the family had been viewing was still playing on their television set. That film was Night of the Living Dead. Thanks for listening, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your own story, the links for my email and subreddit will be down below. I've also created a Discord, so if you want to join that, the link will be in the description down below as well. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And with that said, have beautiful nightmares, and I will see you next time.